Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Generally, I have a very loud voice, like a teacher's voice, but I'll refrain from to save my throat. So, hello, everybody. Today, we have a very, very interesting discussion, and I have an interesting panel here with me from diverse background and experience and very rich experience to share with us. Somebody had told me once that people are not disabled, but the environment makes them disabled. Similarly, for diversity, for women or for non-binary, it's not them, but it's the environment that gives them the handicap, even if they have the will and the skill. So for today's conversation, we'll keep that in mind and see how technology can actually help and enable, because today everything is about technology, not just in the conference, but in the world outside. Let me tell you a little bit about Catalyst. So at Catalyst, we work with girls in STEM education and engineering to prepare them for leadership roles, because there are not enough women leaders, and even the undergraduate degree does not prepare them. So what we want to do is give them the interventions, the support system, so that they can become leaders. We can widen the talent pool and bridge the gap. We also have a program for women in careers, Alchemist, where we create a support system for them, and so that they can survive and thrive to become purpose-driven leaders. Now, why I'm saying this, you must have heard me say support system a couple of times, because we can't work in isolation. So we have to, of course, think of ourselves like the me plus we theme, and aligning to that, like we are preparing each of our young women to think about themselves, to enhance their skills, to get that confidence and self-esteem, and then join the community to create that impact. So if they get impacted, they're going to pay it forward and impact others as well. So, and we are also undergoing a digital transformation so that it becomes an enabler to create a wider impact. So now I'll turn to my panelists and ask them how technology is enabling each of them in what they do. And I'm sure in the course of that, they will share their journey and their interesting and diverse work. Thank you. Yes. So basically, I may, if they don't volunteer, I will voluntold. I will pick them.
So I have been volunteered by Anirvan. So let me start. I'm Prashant from Interview Consulting. And the topic is about tech for social good and the intentionality behind it in creating that social good. And that's exactly the space where we work, because we fundamentally believe that tech is always for good. Tech, even when we created how to harness the nuclear energy or any of the technology breakthroughs that we can think about, was always for the good of humanity. It's only the intentionality of people on how to use it has really turned it upside down in some cases. So there is tech as tech in terms of to be developed, applied, carried forward, and there is people who are behind creating it, and people who are behind applying it, and people who are impacted by it. So in our work, we deal with that intentionality of people. How do we look at things from a very inclusive perspective, from a greater good perspective, and how do we create that society and ecosystem in making sure that not only tech, but everything else that we touch is intentionally for the good of all of us. So I will pause here and...
Okay, so if I, hello everyone, so myself Akashdeep, I am founder and CEO of Seralix. And if I just briefly cover out, by my background, so I am also a person with visual impairment myself. I can't hardly see who is sitting in the audience. It's very less vision, but still, and I have done my master's and PhD from IIT Delhi, and I'm also one of the committee member in Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, where we are monitoring how well we are implementing the guidelines for making the public theater films accessible. So you may be wondering like how I'm doing this, all of that, even when I can't see much. So that is all due to the digital accessibility. I can read through the text-to-speech based software that get converted into the speech, whatever is written on my screen, and I can understand, okay, what is there, and I can accordingly operate. So tech is a big enabler for me because if you think about, it's very hard for me to go out and do the shopping, to do the different thing like go out and have the food and everything. But like through the different apps, through the technology, I can get all that things delivered at my home. So tech in a way is a big enabler for me because that is bringing what I can't do due to my disability, through the technology I can do everything just on a click of my fingers.
Thank you.
Wow, thanks. Good afternoon. My name is Anirban, and who in this audience does not agree that tech is an enabler? So why are you here? We're done, we can all go home. Okay, so on a more serious note, so my name is Anirban Bhattacharya. So the Painted Sky is one of the things I do. I'm also an investor with another company called Seventh Gen Ventures, which is we invest in startups in sustainability and climate tech. 31 years now, doing various things, last 12 years in this role. So yes, I think if I go to Akashdeep's beautiful story, and I'm inspired, man, seriously. You can't see the audience, even I can't see the audience because the light is on my face. And this is ecosystem design. So I work a lot in the space of design thinking, human-centered design. I'm India's only Hasso-Plattner certified coach in that space. I've been doing it since 2009. And I think, to go back to what Purvi just beautifully said, it's the mismatch between environment and experience. And to go back to what Prashant called out, it's not with bad intention, but we forget. Our design turns to exclusion because we forgot to include. So I specialized in inclusive design back when I was studying design thinking, and ability was one, but of course, diversity at a larger level, inclusion at a larger level. I don't believe in diversity. It's a numbers target, which is absolute bullshit. How do we build cultures and societies that are inclusive? See, I always believe that you can have diversity without inclusion. You can't have inclusion without diversity. And if we get that right, I think every corporate leader who comes and jabbers away will probably get it right. And I'm sorry, I'm a bit of a skeptic, because one of the things I come to GHCI and see is, where are the men? Where are the people who are blocking inclusion? And it's not men, there are many women also blocking inclusion. But I think the whole objective of a celebration like this is to bring those diverse perspectives together and listen to people saying, there is a struggle to get included. And are we listening? And that's the work we do. We try to expand into what we in design call edge cases, extreme users, and try to learn from them. So just to complete that, there's a beautiful book called Mismatch, written by Catherine Holmes, Cat Holmes. She's a designer. She wrote this when she was heading usability at Microsoft. I think now she's with Salesforce. And this changed my way of looking at designing for inclusion. So this is what we do, whether it's a product to whether it's culture. How do you include people?
Thank you. Very interesting thoughts. And let's cheer for a few good men on the panel and one on the audience.
Yeah, one on the audience. I can barely see you though.
No, so interesting. Yeah, so our panel is also a little diverse. We have men.
Crew members as well.
Yes, yes. So thank you for being there. Okay, so now we'll reverse the order. And I'll go to Anirban first. And I want to ask him that because he works in designing space, design, and because of his pet peeve now, DEI, though he's a skeptic, it is under in his, I think mindset and DNA. So when you are working with your clients or with people, how much of their set belief, underlying belief, or the iceberg theory, as you may call it, and the environment influences their decision.
Okay, first of all, I'm not a skeptic per se. I'm a skeptic of, I think, the lip service we see. I think, we are celebrating here on Thursday and Friday. And what do you experience as a woman manager, woman leader back at work on Monday is the question we should ask. So I think it's not about skepticism. Of course, I think anybody who has spent time and effort to travel to this part of the town on a Thursday morning is not a skeptic in that sense, right? It's just about the application of it, the impact of it. Coming back to your point, I think hugely. But again, I think where my work comes in, and I've seen that really work, is often that you need to nudge people to change the lens, to see things for what they are. It's not, again, that people are not convinced about it. Because, today I'll be honest, and I think Akash, I'm going to shamelessly steal this data point from Akashdeep, who in that call told me, the purchasing power of customers with disability is $13 trillion. Okay? So, to me, anybody who's designing today has to keep that in mind, because that's a customer base you're losing out. Now, I can go and talk to people about the general greatness of having a diverse workforce, but that only sinks in when I show ROI. When I show the manager, that boss, you bring in somebody who has a different perspective, whether it's based on ability, whether it's based on background, exposure, education, whatever. That perspective leads to innovation. That innovation leads to better products. That product leads to better performance, to profits. Your bonus, everybody listens. So I think our communication, when we change it, we kind of show people the things they are missing out. And that's where also then the environment starts to change. When you put a wheelchair ramp outside an office, you are thinking that way. Yeah. So, and one of the things that I always remind is that when you design for extreme users, when you're designing keeping extreme users in mind, you're not designing for. There's a difference. So if you replace the entire staircase with a wheelchair ramp, you have excluded the mainstream. But if you are ready to give space for both, that's when you're thinking of being inclusive. And I think that's where we fail in design, because sometimes we are getting so far away that we are ignoring others in our design for a certain set. So at sometimes, Neha, my friend who leads design at Intuit, says, we're always excluding someone. So how do we become more inclusive is a question. Yeah.
Thank you. It's interesting. Sometimes you're overthinking or over-egging the pudding. So that's an interesting perspective. Never thought of it that way. But so just to add on question. So where does technology fit in all this? Since that's the theme, topic of our discussion.
Sorry. So you see, I always believe that technology is just an enabler. It's the intent that is needed, and then you figure out. So one of my design gurus, he's a Tufts professor, Jared Spool, always says that design is the rendering of intent. So it's technology, by the way. So, but do we understand the intent? So technology, exactly what he's saying, is really helping us. It's making lives easier, reducing usage barriers, reducing, friction. At the same time, we have to understand that even technology is also not always inclusive. Because there are people behind the technology. So it's about changing their mindset to make them increase the size of their vision or the width of their vision, I think. Because I work with over 100 tech companies, okay, around the world. And they're making the best of tech products which are supposed to make life easier. But whose life is getting made easier is the question. Again, you're missing people out, because tech can only do what you ask tech to do, to Prashant's point. In the wrong hands or in unaware hands, it misses out. So definitely an enabler, but again, that intentionality is important. Awareness and intentionality are critical.
Interesting. So in yesterday's, I don't know how many people were there in the dinner yesterday from here. Bo said that she was giving citing a story or example, and she had to go back to the tech team because something that they had developed didn't work for all, and it was not inclusive. She went back to them and said, "But why didn't you, think from women's point of view or from this target group point of view?" They said, "Oh, women are edge cases." And she was like, "What? Women are edge cases?" So, like he rightly said, technology is ultimately developed by people. So, it's people who you need to work with, not technology. So, coming to Akashdeep, you, how do you sensitize people and policy makers to make it more inclusive? And again, how is technology enabling that?
Sure. So, generally, when I start my discussion with anyone, I generally ask three questions to them. Like, do you know how a blind person can even operate a mobile phone? Or do you know how a deaf person can enjoy a video having the audio content? Or how a person who does not have the hands can still operate the computer? And what happens is, most of the time, most of the people doesn't have answers to these questions. And that's way, like I create that curiosity and then try to explain them. And the bigger thing which is required is more and more such kind of discussions happening in the mainstream. For a very long time, these kind of discussions was happening exclusively in the accessibility related conferences. But now these are coming mainstream and everyone is talking about accessibility. And otherwise, in the past, when someone used to talk about diversity and inclusion, or maybe when I used to talk somewhere, someone asked about, do you know accessibility? Yeah, we know, like it's like how we can make something accessible in the remote areas, or how we can like marginalized community. Okay, but do you know how that can be made for persons with disabilities? So most of the people doesn't know that. And they don't know even person like most of the people doesn't know like how a blind person can even operate the mobile phone. They will think like maybe, and many of the people even nowadays know about the braille because they used to see the braille symbols all around in the building, in the lifts. So most of the people say, yeah, we have seen some dots. Like they even don't know the name. It's a braille. They say, yeah, there are some dots through which they can read. So like then I say, okay, that is one thing, but another thing is audio. Like you just like there's already softwares which are text-to-speech based software, and you're using them. Like you, many of the times you use text-to-speech, but you never think about like text-to-speech can also help person with blindness read the information which is there. Similarly, many of the times you used to watch the subtitles when you are watching a movie in the language which you don't know, which you can't really understand. Like you're watching a Korean movie or a Japanese movie, you watch subtitles. But can we do the same thing for the person with deafness? Can we have the captions there in the same language where the conversation is going on? Can we have the sign language going on so that who can't hear they can understand? So technology in a way, like we need to talk more and more about these possibilities, these scenarios, so that people understand how person with disability can access the digital world. And digital world, the technology is a big enabler for all the persons with disability. And this is not just gonna help person with disabilities. Like we were discussing about the ramp. Ramp is initially was requirement for a person with wheelchair users, but now everyone uses. The old age, when you have to carry like heavy luggages to this somewhere, you use the ramp. You don't lift them over the stairs and bring them up. You use the ramp. So it actually helps everyone. So with that, I would like just close right now.
Thank you. That's so true. Like a lot of times we take things for granted because we are used to doing things in a certain way and we have not thought from that perspective. So I was in Rochester Institute of Technology 30 years ago, and it was very interesting. So they have NTID, you must be aware of, institute, which is for deaf and mute. And they had phones in those times, which were TTD phones, which were accessible for deaf and mute. And like, I was blown away at that time. And I can see that some awareness and changes happening now. Moving on to you, Prashant. You have like 4 decades of experience, though you look very young, and also a lot of experience in HR. So in HR, like now the pet peeve is, or the focus or agenda is diversity and inclusion. Intention, so not the checkbox, but it has to happen, but you have some targets. So you consult so many companies. What do you see is the hurdle? Of course, like I said, there will be people, mindsets, there's technology. What do you think is the?
So the hurdle, if you want to call it that way, is about privilege, right? When you are privileged and you know that you are privileged and you can apply your privilege in different ways, sometimes very subtle, sometimes everyday, sometimes serious thing. Why should you give that up, right? So there is always this closed mindset of privilege being held closely and the reluctance to let it go by being more inclusive. That is one. Second is there is also a fear of unknown. I am very comfortable with people homogeneous to myself. I can talk, I can share jokes, but if I have somebody else who I don't understand, then there is an uncertainty. But linking that to technology, for example, when I was growing up in the 60s and, when we thought of technology or a technologist, like, today I can ask the group, who's a technologist? We had the image of, for example, an Einstein standing in a lab and with a lot of formulas written. And it was a very small group of people we looked at with awe, right? But if you flip it today, who's a technologist? Anybody who writes code? A 7-year-old writes code today, right? So technology has moved out of the lab. And technology has moved across all kinds of spaces, geographies, cultures, levels. Technology has been democratized a huge lot, right? So along with that democratization of technology, if our mindset of inclusion doesn't come hand in hand, that is where the problem comes. And that is where, our work, we try to contribute because our work is with all levels of employees in organizations. How to make their mind and their hearts a little bit more inclusive. And if that fundamental shift happens a little bit, then in the work that they do, when they create an algorithm for an AI tool, that algorithm will not exclude a group of people, or the algorithm will not be trained on data sets which are not representative of a larger group of people. And that, to us, is the importance of reaching out to people and making that whole construct of technology much wider, much more democratized, and hence much more inclusive.
Interesting. So that brings me to the next question about everybody's talking about AI, ML, and so many more letters now coming LLM. How do you, and anybody can answer this, and how can AI, ML be enabler? Again, people are behind it and they are feeding those experiences or data points to, generate that. How can we ensure that it actually learns the good thing and not, backfire?
I'm very, very distant from being an AI expert, but being in the space of inclusion and being in the space of inclusion now, it is difficult not to be in the fringes of AI and machine learning. So one of the obvious things is how AI is constructed, and we talk about how algorithms are being built and how it is being built by people who are not diverse or diverse. And I'm not talking about diverse, and I fully agree with Anirban in terms of diversity as a representation. I'm talking about diversity in terms of thought processes, diversity in terms of backgrounds, diversity in terms of cultures. Some of it would be visible and some of it might not be visible. So one is that in AI, as it is in the formative stage itself, we need to create those norms and guardrails which sort of compels people to go beyond that majoritarian view of a particular thing and say, look, if you look at who's the CEO of an organization and ask ChatGPT, will you get colored, South African lady who is 62 years old, is the question, right? So one way of looking at it, that's not a representative sample yet. And, but at the same time, is it one of the possibilities? So unless we start moving in things like that, and also put guardrails on how it cannot be misused, right? There are enough cases, American prison system, one large tech company's hiring system, which was becoming extremely exclusive because of use of AI. So how do we guard ourselves against those kind of risks? So these are some of the things that we need to intentionally engage with and make sure that in the formative years of these technologies, it is guided properly.
May I just add something to that? I think absolutely agree, Prashant. It's people behind the AI, right? I mean, they're the people giving us Donald Trump, so I don't know. The fact is, look at it this way. All of us are products of what we call the 3 E's. Your exposure, education, and experience. If in your environment you have opportunities to be exposed to, get educated on, and have experiences in diverse set of people, diverse thought processes, you will bring that into what you design. And to his point, I think Akashdeep's point is absolutely correct. The fact is, often we are ending up designing for people like us. It's called ability bias. And that ability bias excludes because the designer has that bias, the engineer has that bias. So how do you go past that is a question. But then I don't know. I think if I think of the generative side of it, I mean, maybe with the guardrails, maybe remembering that, there are positives that are possible. And I'll again be a little caustic here. Human intelligence got us here. Maybe artificial intelligence will do better. Yeah, and hopefully if we can instill these in the education system, how are we educating our engineers? How are we educating our designers? Are they getting exposure? Are they going back into the same classrooms? I mean, 99% of Indian design schools teach children to make shiny shoes. Okay, there is no focus on research. There is no ability to do research. There is no focus on how do you do an interview and understand somebody's real lived experience. If you don't go there, then you're just copying and pasting what exists. So that's what the mindset is when you end up designing. So AI can only design what you give it to design, but I have hope.
Yes, we all have hope. And I'm mindful of the time as well. I just wanted to have one quick question again, and because we discussed that the other day, we had talked about technology as a boon and how we can leverage and how it's an enabler. We have DigiYatra and Google Pay and everything. Sorry. Do you see any bane? I mean, there is bane, but can you caution on any bane?
You missed the last answer. Now it's your turn.
Sorry, can you repeat last slide?
Are there any bane or the risk of DigiYatra, etc.? Do you see digital ecosystems? Is there a risk you see?
Okay, so yeah, so there are a lot of risk and anything there are always some goods and some bads with anything. Like if you think about the digital nowadays, we are having a lot of frauds when it comes to digital payments. Like recently there was a case going on around digital arrest. So lots of frauds are happening around digital. Again, Prashant said that it depends on in whose hand the technology is. You can use it for the good, you can use it for the bad. That depends on what is your intention, and you need to be aware of it. Like what I always say is that don't create the barriers, create the awareness. You shouldn't restrict that. You shouldn't be using this technology. You shouldn't be allowed to use this technology. Like many of the people says that like there are a lot of cyber frauds are happening. Like if we will make digital platforms accessible to persons with disabilities, and they will also be suspected to these frauds. I says that if we are not giving them access, they are even more suspected to get frauds because they need to share more of their confidential details with someone else to get the same thing done. Okay, so you should not be creating the barrier, you should be creating the awareness so that everyone understands and be prepared when something wrong happens with them. They know, okay, they can suspect if something wrong is going, this is not correct, and I should be protecting myself.
I just would like to add another thing which we didn't touch upon is that one of the challenges to technology moving at such a fast pace is the inequality divide from an economic perspective as well. Because more and more power gets concentrated in fewer hands, and then there's a lot of missing out by large groups of people, and who are not in a position to access these newer technologies and things like that. So there are initiatives like what Kerala government did. They made broadband access a basic human right. Right. So there are many things like that which we need to also keep in mind when we talk about tech for social good. Tech for social good with affordability. What is the affordability? Who can afford it? Who is it for? You know, and I think that's a very important thing to address. Otherwise, it will, you know, just widen the gap and it will just blow up on everybody's face at some point of.
So true. So diversity and inclusion includes access, true, right? So in terms of the financial access, so if we have, everybody has that in mind, people, profits can be there, corporates have to make profits, but profit, people, purpose. If the purpose is kept in mind, then
Actually, a few years back, the World Economic Forum changed this whole 3P thing of people, planet and profit to people, planet and prosperity, because prosperity is a wider term and it sort of covers communities rather than just profit.
Yeah, but that's why I want to add purpose, because like we all talk about intentionality, and if you know the right purpose and even leveraging it for positive, if you know the purpose of larger good, technology for social good, it's going to happen. Thank you all very much for this interesting conversation and sharing your thoughts. I want to open it out to the audience if anyone would like to ask them any questions. We have 5 minutes.
We have been a very impressive panel. Nobody has a question. You've covered everything. You are completely and convinced of everything we have said. Well done. Well done, folks.
Maybe everyone is sleeping.
Yeah, I love post-lunch sessions.
But one last time. I think you have an impressive panel, I must say. But